Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to a special edition of APTN National News on this National Indigenous Peoples Day. The annual APTN Indigenous Day live concert hit the Forks over the weekend. Our Daryl Stranger and Tamara Pimentel were there.
From traditional music to contemporary, from art to dancing, APTN's Indigenous Day Live showcased the diversity and talent of Indigenous people across the country. Adam Garnett-Jones is APTN's Director of TV Content and Special Events. He says it's a rare opportunity for all communities to gather in celebration.
The key word there is celebration. You know, there's so many different things that, from covering the news, there's so many difficult stories in our communities. There's so many days that we mark that aren't about celebration.
Family events and dozens of performers drew in hundreds of Winnipeggers, Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
It's really nice to see a lot of people, especially the Indigenous one. So just like what he said, we want to support.
And this is what I call reconciliation, is when you see other cultures coming to celebrate with us.
This year's theme is celebrating our youth. Young people had an opportunity to take part in things like beading and carving workshops.
We thought that was a really important message to get out to people, because there are so many hard things that we deal with, and we just need to spend a little bit more time lifting each other up.
And for artists like Amy McPherson, it's a chance to educate.
Like, I love sharing my culture, so there's been a lot of people who've come from, who are non-Indigenous, and then I teach them a little bit of stuff about our culture, and I think it's great that we can share that with everyone.
We weren't able to, celebrate our culture in the past, and now we are, and it feels really good. So it's my favorite day. Every day should be Indigenous Day. Yes.
There was some exceptional talent on display at Indigenous Day Live. DJ Osho is an Afro-Indigenous performer from Squamish Nation in British Columbia. With more, here's Daryl Stranger.
Bringing diversity to many of the acts at Indigenous Day Live is Oreen Askew, or DJ Osho, a member of the Squamish Nation in British Columbia. Performing at events like this has been a dream of hers since she discovered her love for music.
I've loved music since I was 13 years old. I would make mix CDs, if anyone knows what those are, for my friends. I really just aged myself there. And I would put my voice and just play tracks that I really, really liked on them, and it just paid off.
With a background in radio broadcasting, DJ Osho brought a hip-hop spin to traditional music and dance at Indigenous Day Live.
You're almost like an emotion controller, and I take that really seriously. I have the best job in the world, and it's to make people happy. It's worth $1 million to me, is making people smile with their eyes.
Back home in Vancouver, DJ Osho takes part in speaking engagements and holds DJ workshops while bringing her unique Afro-Indigenous worldview to her performances.
I'm definitely drawing from personal experiences. I'm Afro-Indigenous, and there's so much going on in our world and what I do, and I'm actually on the Two-Spirit Council for the BC AFN, so the Assembly of the First Nations. So I've seen a lot, and I've been on our Chief and Council for the Squamish Nation, so I've seen a lot, and music helps us express what's inside our hearts and what's inside of us and our feelings, and I'm glad it's there because it's like therapy, but that's where I draw from, is my experience. It kind of is storytelling. That's in our DNA, right? We're Indigenous people. That's what we do.
Inuit represented at the show, or at the event, was Selah, a throat-singing duo from across Nunavut. Here again is Daryl Stranger.
Charlotte Hominick and Cynthia Pitsulak make up Selah.
Selah is actually a super powerful Inuktitut word. It's the land, it's the water, it's the ocean, it's the mountains. Selah is what surrounds us.
The Inuit throat singers have been performing nationally and internationally for almost 20 years.
I love to just, share katajak with the world. It was something that was nearly taken away from us, and it's been something that we've been working very hard to revitalize.
It's an ancient tradition that's been passed down among Inuit women for many, many generations. We can't actually even put a date on it.
During rehearsals for Indigenous Day Live, the group put a bit of a spin on traditional throat singing. The two-time Juno Award nominees were representation for Inuit during Saturday's performance, bringing a rare and ancient art form to the audience.
There's many reasons for throat singing. Throat singing is entertainment. Throat singing is a competition between the two singers. It's a great way to stay warm or to warm up if you're feeling cold. Throat singing can...
There's some songs that to even like put babies to sleep. You know, if you carry the babies on your back, you could, you know, lull them to sleep with some throat songs.
It's a spiritual art form.
Good stuff. Asanabi is primarily a singer-songwriter, but he mixes it up by collaborating with other artists. The OG Cree from Sandy Lake First Nation in Ontario joined our Daryl Stranger for a talk about all things music and his career.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to be joined by Asanabi. Asanabi, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to speak with us ahead of Indigenous Day Live, so we really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So my first question for you is just, for somebody who may not have heard of you or they're seeing you for the first time, who is Asanabi, and can you sort of describe your music for us?
Yeah. OG Cree, singer-songwriter for Sandy Lake First Nation in Ontario. I'm an alt-rock soul singer, kind of make more contemporary indie rock music, I guess. So that's where I'm at now, but, you know, I keep wanting to evolve and grow and keep kind of pushing the boundaries. So.
Well, going back a little bit into maybe your childhood and sort of how you got started in music, how did you get started in music? What sort of drew you to music and to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely options, I guess. I grew up kind of in this off-grid households outside in rural northern Ontario. We had this house without electricity, without running water, and so guitar was one of the three things I had to kind of, entertain myself. So that's how I got into music.
And when you make music, what do you base a lot of your music off of? Is it your personal experiences? Is it the world around you? Like, what do you draw from for inspiration when you're making and writing music?
Definitely all of those things. I mean, this project I just put out was definitely, much different than how I normally write music. The album I put out was based on the stories of my grandfather, and there was a lot more intention behind it, a lot more focus and direction. Whereas, sometimes when I'm writing songs just about my personal life, whether regardless of which part of my life it touches on, sometimes it can be kind of all over the place, and there's just one song inspired by this, one song inspired by this, whatever it is. But the body of work I put out was all inspired by just conversation with my grandfather. So that's how that album was written. As far as the new music I've been working on in the last year, just kind of writing about my experiences and kind of what's happened since writing that record.
And for somebody who's coming to see you for the first time tomorrow and in future shows, when you're making music and you're performing, is there a message in the shows that you're trying to take away, or is it sort of dependent on sort of what it is you're performing and where you are, or is it sort of a universal thing?
Yeah, definitely it will vary on the song. Like there's no right or wrong way to make music. It's all expression, it's all creativity, and definitely with this last album, it touches on a lot of very kind of heavy context, like residential schools and all the suffering that happened there, and the trickle down effect, and so I mean, like, I feel like especially on a day like Indigenous Day, like it's just that means a lot for us to acknowledge that, so we're not making the same mistakes, but I just hope people feel something and are able to kind of come away from these songs, maybe learning something they didn't know about before.
And when it comes to what you do, what's the favorite part of what you do when it comes to making music and writing lyrics and everything? What's your favorite part of doing all of that?
Yeah.
If you have a favorite part, I mean, it could just be...
If I'm, I really love writing a new song. There's something about writing a new song and kind of kind of taking a little part of yourself and putting it onto a piece of paper or into a recording, and a lot of the time that kind of just happens to me in private when I'm just like at home and I have my equipment and I just finish a new song, and it's just such a I feel accomplished when I complete something. So when I finish a song, I feel I get a lot of fulfillment out of that. Yeah.
Well, and on that same note, when you share a piece of yourself, because that's a lot of what you do when you're making music with others, when you share a piece of yourself with others, what sort of goes through your mind, and how does that make you feel, sharing a bit of your journey with others?
Yeah, I mean I'd say it varies for sure. Like I've definitely played. I've played festivals where 20,000 people see there, and they've never seen me before, and they appreciate it. And then I've played to rooms with 20 people, and everyone just talks over you. So, I honestly, there's been kind of crazy moments that have kind of stood out to me. Since putting out that record, even like some of the messages and feedback I've been getting has been like, pretty nice. Like, for the context of the record, it does touch on residential school, and so I was worried about putting the record out, whether or not some of the songs would kind of re-traumatize residential school survivors, because I didn't think so many people would hear the record. I thought it'd be the same small group of friends that had been coming out to my shows, right? And so when residential school survivors reached out, like just on social media, and just said like, hey, I'm so happy to hear our stories finally told by our people and our voices and our way, and keep going, and like I found it so healing and validating. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I had messages from this 30-year-old guy. He's like, hey, just so you know, I'm so-and-so. I'm a 30-year-old white guy from Southern Ontario, and I listened to your record, and I didn't know all this stuff happened, and I just want to thank you. I listened to the music, and then I started doing my research, and I'm kind of like ashamed of what this country did, and so like the feedback is what was originally going to just be like a family kind of time capsule family album. I didn't know it would have kind of the impact that it's been having. So
again, I want to say thank you, Miigwech, to you for sharing a few minutes and a bit of your story with us, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, Miigwech, thank you.
All right, thank you.
What a big year it's been for Asanabi, and I predict another big year coming. Coming up after the break, we'll sit down with Governor General Mary Simon. Stick around. Welcome back to this special edition of APTN National News on this National Indigenous Peoples Day. Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon, made history as the first Indigenous Governor General in Canada. She sat down with me to talk about what Indigenous Day means to her. Governor General Simon, thanks for being with us. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
This is going to be the first Indigenous Peoples Day with a new monarch on the throne. What are your hopes for reconciliation going forward?
I'm very hopeful, and the work that we are doing here in Canada is significant, and I'm looking forward to the continued work with His Majesty King Charles III. And from the discussions I've had with him, he's very committed and very interested in working with Canadians, and especially Indigenous peoples.
You've been in your role for a couple of years now in what I think we could probably call a historic time, a new monarch, the Pope's apology and visit, the discovery of suspected unmarked graves. What is your message for Indigenous peoples on this day?
Well, I think that it's very important to remember the history of why reconciliation is so important for us today in Canada. The history that we're addressing dates back many years, and only recently, I think, have we really realized in Canada how difficult this history has been for Indigenous peoples. So working on reconciliation as the Governor General, I have optimism for the development of our relationship between Indigenous peoples and other Canadians in this country. There is a lot of work that requires some very hard discussions, conversations that we must have together. But I think there is a lot of room for optimism, and the initiatives and the work that's being done now indicates that Canadians and Indigenous peoples as well are very willing and eager to try and work things out between Indigenous peoples and Canadians, and to have the space that is needed for that conversation to take place. A difficult conversation in many respects, but a very necessary conversation that we must have together.
Now, National Indigenous Peoples Day is a busy day for you. Can you walk us through some of the events you're taking part in today? Yes,
we'll have the flag raising in the morning, and then we will have the honors ceremony here at Rideau Hall. And it's a very special event for us here at Rideau Hall, because we will be recognizing many of the Indigenous peoples that have done tremendous work here, not just for Indigenous peoples, but for the country as well as other Canadians that have given a great contribution to the work of reconciliation. So it's going to be a very special day for all of us, and it'll be an event that will recognize many of the achievements that Indigenous peoples have made and are making to our own people and also to Canadians.
Yeah, the nearly 40 names there that are going to be honored with different citations for the Order of Canada. A lot of people and names that will certainly stick out for people. Governor General Mary Simon, we'll leave it there, but again, happy National Indigenous Day to you, and thanks for taking some time for us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Language and culture go hand in hand, and Lena Evik fights for it every day. She is one of the founders and president of the Evik Center, an adult Inuit language learning center in Nunavut's capital. Trevor Wright has more.
The Evik Center, primarily located in Iqaluit, has been around in one form or another since 2004. Lena Evik says she has always been an ardent supporter of keeping Inuktitut, or Inuit languages, alive.
And it was my passion to speak it. I believed then, and I still believe today, that as Indigenous cultures around the world, we have inherent right to teach in our language, to learn in our language, to grow in our language.
Evik says elders are essential in teaching younger generations of Inuit Inuktitut.
Have to get it from our older generations, and so that's just one of the most important and significant, reasons why we bring in our elders. Yeah. And they are the greatest professors, I can tell, like I've ever had myself. Yeah.
She says it's never too late to pick up a book and start learning.
Whatever we start today can always have a positive ripple effect down the road. But if we maintain it, if it continues to get the right support, we're actually creating a better tomorrow for our Inuit young generations.
What would help in keeping Indigenous languages alive, says Evik, is institutional recognition and support.
It really needs a structural grounding that it needs by being recognized at all levels of, governance structures, and being one of official languages of Canada. We cannot always be served in our Inuktitut language here in our own territory, because French and English are official languages and they come first.
Keeping Indigenous languages alive in Canada, for Evik, is an important step to reconciliation.
Making the wrong right really is big on Indigenous languages, in my view.
Trevor Wright APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Well, it's grad time, and one artist has designed new graduation robes for the University of Manitoba. More on that after the break. Welcome back to this special edition of APTN National News on this National Indigenous Peoples Day. A Saskatoon organization has been continuously planning events for reconciliation year-round since 2016. Reconciliation Saskatchewan now has over 11 organization members. They started the Rock Your Roots Walk, which included survivors, newcomers, leaders, and anyone willing to walk for reconciliation. While the walk takes place on Orange Shirt Day in September, the next Reconciliation Saskatoon event takes place about a week after National Indigenous Peoples Day on June 28th. Carrie Catherine is the manager of Community Reconciliation and says these all-inclusive events are free and open to the public.
It's a talk with Métis artist and educator David Garneau, who is going to talk about his own experiences as an artist doing commemorative and renaming projects in other cities. He's going to talk about events that are happening all over the country as we are all called to respond to the calls to action and how we can do that.
Well, it's grad time and celebrations are everywhere. New graduation robes have been designed for the University of Manitoba. Tamara Pimentel has more.
So I've designed the robes with Ojibwe flower motifs.
43,000 beads went into these graduation robes. They'll be worn by University of Manitoba's president and chancellor during convocation. They were designed by Anishinaabe artist Jackie Travers, who's also a U of M Fine Arts alumni.
More of our people are starting to graduate, and it's about time that we're allowed to represent our nations and our culture and pride in where we come from.
The design was unveiled after a blessing ceremony. It features the prairie crocus with strong roots connecting to red and orange buds, representing MMIW and the children who never made it home from residential school. Michael Benarosh is president and vice chancellor of the University of Manitoba.
So the blue line and the gold here you can see on the old robes, and this is honoring the past but showing that we are moving forward in a different way, in a more inclusive way as we move forward. And as you said, there have been students and even some of our people who work, elders and others, who have wanted to wear their traditional robes to convocation, and I think this sends a strong message that that's okay at the University of Manitoba, and we will accept that. And not only will we accept it, we will honor it.
From here on out, the robes will be worn at every convocation. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Beautiful work as always. Well, that is all the time we have for this special edition of APTN National News on this National Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy, thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your National Indigenous Peoples Day.